It's a beautiful city. Sounds like it.
All righty. Well, welcome to yet again the Union, engaging conversations about personal growth. We've been chatting in our little green room ahead of time, so we're going to jump right into the topic, and we'll introduce ourselves in a few minutes, assuming that we've engaged your attention enough to get you to that point. Today's topic, we're talking about the ups and downs of life. The way I put it is how to ride the wave of life without drowning under it. And we'll just kind of go around quickly and get people involved, and everybody can kind of say what their idea of that is real fast, and then we can just kind of talk about it. Who wants to start? Desiree, I'll start with you. How's that?
Okay. So riding the wave, when you were talking about that, it just made me kind of think. I immediately went to like, oh wow, I kind of go on this like free, like I get on the wave and I just go woo and like follow the ride. I was thinking about how like sometimes or a lot of times I'm pretty unconscious on my wave of life because I just follow like the next step with my kids and then the next step with my work and the next step with my clients. And then pretty soon I end up underneath it. I feel like I'm underneath it a little bit right now. My brain's been a little foggy the last couple of days. I like poured out and poured out and poured out. Didn't realize that I was about to like go under. And that's kind of where I'm at right now is like, I went under and I'm like, okay, what do I do to get out? What do I do to get out? You know, and typically what I do to get out is state changes or like connection with my friends, connection with my girlfriends, although I'm mad at one of them. She's leaving town very soon, so I'm going to have to find another way. So, like, you can't leave tomorrow. What are you talking about? So, yeah, so that for me is like, that's the riding the wave. And then like, you know, how to get back out for me is like state changes, different kinds of state changes.
Dre, what do you call it when it's?
Yeah, I think as in nature, we as humans have a natural tendency to ebb and flow. And I think that our culture, our society kind of puts all the attention on the flow. And you see this everywhere. So it's like we're constantly doing, we're constantly producing. And so that's what I would say is, you know, is the wave, is the flow. It's like when you're riding it, you're putting out energy, you're doing, you're making things happen. You're in a state of agency. And then there is the ebb, which in my opinion is the being, right? So there's the doing and then there's the being. And the down or the ebb is for me is like, okay, coming back and actually integrating all of the things that I pushed out to be in the world, and then coming back into, it's like expanding. We expand to give and make in the world, and then there's a natural contraction that has to take place where everything that we just put out, we have to come back and actually integrate and then create more space so that we can go back out and do again. So in my opinion, it's very natural, this ebb and flow of life. And I think it's difficult in our culture because we haven't been taught that it's okay to be. And so in the past couple of years, I've really set my life up in a way where I am consistently honoring the process of coming down and creating space, which feels just like so important to be able to put out anything of real substance in the world.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Tim, you also like to use the language of flow. Is that how you want to? I'm curious how you kind of frame what we're talking about today.
Yeah, that's great. And I like what Drea and Desiree both had to say. And for me, you know, there's this flow, an internal flow, and there's an external flow. And how do I maintain my internal flow no matter what's happening on the outside? Because sometimes life has different directions than my internal flow wants to go. So how do I align my flow with the flow of life? right? I believe we're in a co-creative process with life and with one another. So how do I maintain my own centeredness when there's, potential chaos going on around outside me? And for me, I think similar to what Desiree said with her state change is, for me, I got to come back to my daily practices. And I know, when I've had the most challenging external times in my life, I come back to daily practices. There have been times where things are really chaotic and I'm spending an hour and a half to 2 hours or over 2 hours a day doing different breathing exercises, cold showers, saunas, writing exercises, meditations, visualizations, mantra work, just like I'm going to hit this thing with everything I got to get my internal state back in flow, which then typically has the impact of the external flow as well. And I think it all kind of starts within me, and then I can impact the external flow. And it doesn't mean that it certainly makes it easier for me to deal with challenges that are in the external flow if my internal flow is better. And it does often change the external flow, but it's not like it just makes it disappear. And it's not just sugarcoating it. I'm just better able to handle what's happening in the external flow as well. So
nice. Yeah, I kind of want to challenge today. So, I think that we're speaking a few different flavors of the same language around expansion, contraction, and how to kind of manage our internal world in that. In the face of that. But, the thing I want to challenge is I think that there's a generally accepted idea that we should always be trying to get back into the up. There's a like stay joyful, or there's kind of a general kind of even in the what you consider like the non-spiritual world and kind of the production world. There's a be positive, everything's going to be fine kind of thing. And the thing I'd love for us to talk about today is maybe the less talked about thing, which is how do we engage with the ebb, the contraction, the down, the out of alignment, out of flow place in a way that's not necessarily trying to change it. And that's what I'm curious for us to talk about today, because I think that we do. It's easier to just say there's something wrong with the down, and I need to get it back to the up. There's wrong with the contraction, and I need to get it back to expansion. And I'm curious who, and this is, we'll just have it kind of open, and then maybe in another couple of minutes we'll introduce. But I'm curious, whoever wants to talk, how do you engage with the down in a way that isn't necessarily trying to change it?
When you guys were just talking about contraction and the down, so I'm like thinking, okay, you're talking about down, contraction, and then like expansion is like putting yourself out and being up. It just made me think of really what I've been going through this last month, where I had a lot of judgment around myself about being more contracted, like having a lot of attention on myself and being to what other people would consider, I think, down, because I wasn't like, I'm a very like out and involved, and I'm an extrovert. Most people would be like, you don't do anything introverted. So for me to like contract and not have that extrovert personality like coming out all the time to the outside world seems like there's something off. But really for me, I actually took this opportunity to like put all of that attention inward. And it goes to what Tim was talking about, is like getting your internal flow in alignment, where it was like when I was in the contraction period, I was putting a lot of attention back on myself. And when I did that, it actually was serving my external purpose more. So it was like, there was a way where my down and my contraction was serving the up a lot more, because like by taking care of myself first, by putting my gas mask on first, by being in my contraction, I was actually able to do more out in the world in a much cleaner manner than just like exploding all over the place and like not having any consciousness around where I was putting my attention.
Yeah, I would say similar to what Desiree was saying, in that really identify, which I think is what you're saying that you did, is identifying the what's going on inside of us, like being present enough to recognize like, okay, something's out of flow, something's out of alignment here. I'm not feeling myself. What is it? And then for me, it's about identifying, am I feeling afraid? Am I feeling sad? Am I feeling lonely? What are the feelings that I'm actually feeling? Identifying those. And that's what helps me kind of get back into this other flow. So it's not, I think there's a lot of like gratitude whitewashing going around in the personal and spiritual growth world, where you just focus on everything that you're grateful for, which is valuable. But at the same time, I don't think we can use it to sugarcoat or overlook, what our actual experience is, and it seems to me that as we, if we do a gratitude practice every day, which I do, it still helps us to be better skilled, and for those things that are challenging in our life to not impact us as much. And it's like anything, we're going to gain a greater tolerance level for the things that might either irritate us or make us afraid in our life or whatever it is. But I think it's so key.
How do you frame actually being, so I love, so this is like, even here, it's hard to kind of stay in the meat of this conversation, right? Like the thing that you were talking about that seemed the most important was when you're like, identify what it is it fear, is it shame? And then I feel the feelings. But I think that doesn't mean that means very little to most of the people that watch this. Like, I think all, the four of us here have a sense of what that actually
is. Being present and writing it down. I mean, that's a huge thing, just writing about it. Like, if there's an actionable item, it's write about it. That to me is the feeling, like, yeah, I'm feeling it, and we're feeling stuff all day long. So what do I do to release it, to process it? And for me, it's just writing it down. Or sharing with a close friend. So that's the actionable item, I guess. That's the practical thing that I would do to identify it, release it, and then get back into, focusing on daily practice. Does that answer what you're?
It does, and just like getting to like, did you also have like a meditation where you're just like literally sitting and being with yourself in that feeling space, or how does that work? And I want to get to Drea too, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, that's no, I think that for me, it's part of this writing process. It's like, okay, what are the feelings that I'm feeling? And then I write them down. So it's not necessarily a specific meditation, except that I am being quiet myself to identify, okay, I feel this because of this. I feel this because of that. I feel this, and then write them down and let them out.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, Drea, you had started to talk about this at the beginning when you were first talking. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like, it's very gritty. It's kind of like splooge, like there's not really like, it's almost like demonic or something. It's and there's not really much of a formula for it. Like, the more that I try to be like, okay, you're going to do this, it's like, I meditate, so like I meditate for a good hour a day. I take lots of baths. Like, I'll get the water super, super hot, like scalding, and put like a ton of Epsom salts. Me.
Is your bathtub behind you?
No, I brought props. I will just like soak. And there's something about the heat. Like, I make it really dark. I put candles on, and like, I just like let it take me. I'm a body worker. I do a lot of body work. So, for me, a lot of it is not even necessarily like extricating my shit and my emotions, but it's like I'm constantly energetically absorbing other people's stuff. So it's less of, like there's like stuff like I get super annoyed just like being in the world. It feels harsh. And like in the past, I'm always like, I'm just sensitive and like the world is harsh and like I can't handle it. And like I have, like my skin gets really thin. And now it's more like I'm just like detoxing everything, So I do, I have a lot of practices. I have a practice called witnessing, which is also known as authentic movement, which is essentially where you are witnessed in your process of being by another human being. And you set a timer, and literally it's potent in this, like what I've found in it is that you can actually move through human emotion really quickly. Like a human emotion or like something like that really only lasts about 30 seconds. And then you move through it. And so what happens, I think, for a lot of people, and I think there's a tendency for this to happen in the up and in the down, is that we continue to press the lever on it instead of just letting it like get us, you know, like letting myself like feel intense rage for 30 seconds. And
Right.
then it shift like automatically, like I don't even have to do it. I just have to be like, "Rah!" you know, or like whatever the thing is. And then like all of a sudden I'll be like completely still.
Good.
And I'll be like in a state of like intense delirium. And then it'll be like really, really deep longing or sadness. But like to be able to just like move through the emotions organically is really powerful, I think.
That's awesome. We'll do the quick introduction now because I want to keep on going on this spot. So I'll start and we'll just go me, Drea, Desiree, Tim. My name is Keith Paolino, and I work with successful men who are challenged by interpersonal relationships and having them feeling fulfilling and feeling successful inside them. Ms. Mars.
Hello, my name is Drea Mars, and I'm still working on like title. But an embodied experience specialist. So I help people discover access points into deeper parts of themselves through different types of body work and movement.
Nice. Yes.
Sorry, the order that you pointed in is not the order on my screen. That's why I'm like, what? Hi, I'm Desiree Cruz, and I'm desire coach and a lifestylist. And I work with people to really help them design and style a life that they want, head to toe, skin to coat. So it comes from whatever is happening on the inside and how you present it out onto the world as well.
And I'm Tim Hastings. I have a hard time thinking before, like, how do I quantify myself? I hate boxing myself in, but I work with people. What's that?
One sentence is hard, right?
Yeah. I'm so much more than one sentence, guys. Believe me. But I work with people to identify and resolve self-sabotaging emotional and behavioral patterns to achieve the goal, whatever goals they have. So. That's what I summed it up to.
That's a pretty good sentence, Tim, I have to say. Awesome. Well, yeah, so let's keep going on this because I think this is, it feels like we're kind of honing in on it a little bit more too. Right? My thoughts are basically, so one of the things I'm observing in this conversation and in my own life is our conditioned language and perception of sitting with the feelings mostly communicates that it's something to get through. That it almost like it's an obstacle or a hindrance. And I know for me personally, one of the things that I've been working on for myself is to have it be something that I want to do, something that I look forward to doing. That I'm practicing a kind of stillness that isn't like, okay, I've got this problem I need to solve, or this emotional state that I don't really understand is an inconvenience. And I'm noticing that is the primary mode of conditioning around emotions, and it's kind of disconcerting, right? Like it's like the majority, like the overwhelming, our conditioning is based on when we went out of range of sensation and emotional range, usually starting very young. And so, I want to have greater emotional capacity. I want to have greater capacity to be present, to be in connection, and to be with other people's experiences and have that, the sensation of my own body and be able to stay in that, to stay connected. And that is really, like, in my mind, that's what connection is. So, to have these kind of tumultuous internal emotional experiences, and to, you know, I live alone now, so there's nobody, I don't even have any witnesses, right? I could just distract and Facebook and coffee and, you know, whatever. And practices, you know, can also be a distraction. It's still a doing thing in my mind, right? And so, like, nobody's watching, so I'm just, you know, I'm going to distract the hell out of myself from, like, just literally sitting down and being quiet. And writing, I think, is great. You know, I mean, the bath, all I could think of was the womb, like a womb experience that you're creating for yourself. All you can, there's nobody there but you know. And, you know, just like how are we framing these experiences as positive and, you know, something that we want to encourage people to do and to have without needing them to be any particular way or to have any particular outcome.
I think so. You're talking about like not having outcome and sitting and being and feeling, and like, so last night I had an experience where I had gotten some news that I was disappointed about, like pretty deeply disappointed. I don't get real disappointed very often, but I was pretty deeply disappointed, and I was with a friend. And what I loved about it is she actually took something I told her earlier in the week about what she was going through, which was like, if you don't, I saw it on Agape. It's if you don't feel it, you can't heal it. But doesn't mean like you can't, like, there's anything necessarily wrong, but like you're never going to like actually find what's serving you in that thing. And so I was sitting on the couch and I started to get a little more emotional, and she just came over and like hugged me. And then I started crying even more. And then my son, who's 4, comes over and he's like, "Mom, why is water coming out of your eyes?" And I just realized, like, it was in that, she started to tell him like some story. And I was like, no, we have authenticity in this house. And I was like, well, Mommy was trying out for a part and didn't get it. Was like the best way that I could kind of explain to him like what was happening. And so she's sad. So she's like having some feelings about it. And he's like, okay. And he climbs up into my lap and sits down. And the other one climbs up onto the top of me. So we're like this cuddle puddle of like, we're all feeling it. We're like sitting in it and we're feeling it. And then pretty soon I was like, this is awesome. This is awesome that like I can start here where I can like undo a lot of the conditioning that it's not okay to feel this. And then realize like I can work through the emotion on my own, where like how this is serving me, what's going on. And it wasn't that I had to change it, but it was like I had to like alchemize it into my body, into like what was, which was like now there's a lot more opened up and like possibilities. And it's like, oh, like Dre was saying, it's like it passes through. Like you feel it for a minute, and if you let yourself feel it fully, then it'll pass through and it changes into something else. And so like when you're saying that, I was just like that moment last night of like trying to like not explain it as something else, but it is what it is. It's just part of our experience.
That's so cool. Like when you were talking, it made me think about like my relationship to this place, like I'll just call it the down because that's what we're using, but has shifted, and I'm more aware of, okay, I'm trying to like figure out the best way to explain it. But so what used to happen is I used to have a lot going on in my life, and like everything was going really good, and everything that I was wanting and desiring in my life, I was getting. And then there would come a point where like I would go down. Like I would just like all of a sudden it would be like, oh my God, like I am dying. And then I would make up a story about what was wrong, like the problem, you know? Mm-hmm. So like you call that self-sabotaging, right? So it's, you know, there's this saying that we only blow out on the good, which like I actually like I've experienced that. Like anytime that I have really just like my life has completely shattered, it wasn't because there was lots of problems, but it was because I was getting everything that I wanted. And so now what happens is because I have the awareness of that, it's almost like when I come down, it's because I am so full. Like, it's like, everything is so good. It's like I have so much gratitude. Like, that's what I need to like get out, is like, it's less of these like, you know, negative emotions like shame or guilt or jealousy or obsession, or, you know, which all of those are great. I love those, and like I definitely can like be in those. But what's more uncomfortable and more of a stretch is for me to be able to like feel that depth of joy and gratitude, and to let that come out in the down. And so I don't, it's just it's a profound experience, because there's tears and there's like, you know, like it's also not pretty being able to kind of, to just like lay out in that place of like, God, you know, because for me, those grittier kind of like, you know, melancholic emotions are way more comfortable for me to feel. And I have had a relationship with them from my childhood and up. So it's like I've known how to do that. But to actually be able to like spread out into the joy and like the gratitude and all of the good is like another aspect that I'm learning how to be with now. Like the love, you know, the pouring out of love, so that I can receive more. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me. Yeah, I like the kind of the other side of it, so to speak, because I think as you know, we are kind of taught, which is, you know, get to the gratitude, get to the happiness, and that's not true for everybody, because like you said, you know, sometimes we are more comfortable in, you know, a down space or sad place or whatever language or feeling we want to attribute to that. So I think it's a great point. And you know, there's this idea too of feeling our feelings, right? And when we go from feeling our feelings too much, like when is enough of feeling our feelings? You know, when we create our own suffering, because, you know, it is healthy to feel our feelings, but if we get stuck there, or if I get stuck there, you know, then I continue to spiral. And it's like, okay, I've been feeling these feelings for a while now. Like,
when does it become indulgent?
Well, you know, when does it become indulgent and self-sabotaging, right? I mean, when am I just stopping to do what I need to do because I'm just sitting in these feelings? And it's like knowing when, for me, like getting to understand myself well enough to say, okay, these feelings have happened, and now I'm done with them. I'm complete with them for this particular situation, whatever it is that I'm feeling about it. And trusting enough in myself. I think that's a big one for me, is learning to trust myself in what I'm feeling. And, you know, the first time I fell in love, I was like 24 years old. So it's pretty old as far as falling in love goes. And I was a complete mute, didn't know how to talk about my feelings, didn't understand what they were, didn't witness my parents having communication under difficult circumstances. I mean, I grew up, never saw my parents argue. Not once. So it's like, how do I understand, or how did I, excuse me, how do I learn how to have a conversation with somebody about something that's difficult, because I never witnessed it myself. And so not understanding these feelings and everything that's going on, I was kind of setting myself up for not being able to trust myself when I'm having feelings. And so that's kind of the part of it for me, is like, okay, you know, I'm identifying these particular feelings, and now it's time that I can let them go and I can do what I need to do, whether it's writing, taking a bath, or sauna, or whatever it is, and just being able to identify them and say, okay, I'm complete with them for now, you know, and just let them go.
I think it's important too to note that, like, we've kind of come like different ways, where it's like the down is good and the up is good, or the good feeling and the joy is good and the sad feeling is good, is that it's not really about where you're at. It's what you're doing with what you have, what you're feeling at the time. So, and it's not about like really the doing in terms of production. It's more of like, it's like, it's Buddhist. It's a very Buddhist thing, which is like, it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with it that's important. It's that makes you who you are. And because I was just thinking when Drea was talking about like the also equally intense experience of when you are feeling a lot of joy and happiness, and then people they don't always reflect that back to you. They're like, oh, well, why are they feeling great? Like, how come they're doing that? So it's like there can be this this judgment, whether you're feeling great and up or you were feeling down. And it's like bringing it back to yourself and controlling what you can control within yourself. And then what is it that you're going to be doing out there? Keith, are you amused by something?
The idea of control is always, a fun one to play with.
It usually comes up in anything I talk about.
A base kind of mantra or, a touchstone for people that I work with, especially if they don't have a lot of experience in being present and, the language of transformation. I notice and approve. Those of us that have had some kind of meditation or kind of spiritual path understands, attention changes things. That you don't have to use force. That you don't have to use leverage in order for things to move and shift. And so notice and approve. And I think there's a lot of kind of beginner meditators in whatever form that takes for people, where they do the noticing part. And then all of the conditioning around the self-judgment and self-flagellation comes in. And then really what all their attention is all of the negative. And so when I try to say, like, approve is not like cheerleader, like, sis boom ba. I notice I did that same thing that I do in conflict for the 150th time. But rather, like, can you step into that observer role? Can you actually step outside of the pattern, the conditioning, the thing that keeps running, and so I think there's a moving from the unconscious to the conscious or deliberate, kind of what Tim was talking about, but adding almost like a layer in between of getting to where he was talking about, where these days, like, I check out. I'm like, oh, I'm here. I can feel the crest of this, 2-day period where I was doing a lot of work, or, got a lot done, or had a lot of calls about the show, or kind of whatever is happening that feels like a peak. And I can feel it starting, my energy, my attitude, everything starts to roll off. And I'm like, oh, and if there's anybody that's kind of expecting to hear from me, I just send out a couple of texts, and I'm like, I am going to be gone for, 3 to 8 hours, and, whatever that looks like for me, and, looks different. There's practice, maybe there's Netflix, but to have a certain level of approval with that ebb, happening, and do it deliberately and say, oh, this is the part of my kind of peak and valley cycle, and I'm going into this. Can I do it where it's not like, oh, I'm a bad person because I can't effort to stay making more calls and doing more and achieving more, but rather to say, like, oh, this is just, okay, here comes the backside of everything that I've just been doing for the last 2 to 4 days, and how's the backside going to look, and how can I be kind to myself there too? I want to give somebody the last word, and I just want to notice we're already over. These are, I love that they go over, and I also want to respect everyone's time. So who wants the last word? Drea?
I do. I just think that, like, our bodies really know, like, our bodies hold so much wisdom, and I credit my ability to work with the down or the ebb to my body, because really it's like, it tells me. And at this point, I'm so grateful, because I'll get headaches or muscle tension, and, like, it's a sure sign that, like, I need to, like, slow down or chill out, because I can get just as much, like, there's a fine line, right, like, of indulgence in the ebb and in the flow. Like, in the up, like, I can, like, be, like, I love riding high, and, like, I can just, like, keep if I could, I would forever. Like, I'm just like, and so then my body will be like, I'll just, like, get knocked with a headache, and then it's like, okay. And so now I'm starting to just, like, actually feel my body more, but it's also the same is true on the other side of, like, okay, like what Tim was saying, it's like, how like, when am I wallowing? Like, when is, like, and I know, because my body gets super heavy, and I'm just like, I feel like I can't move.
Yep.
Yeah. Or and my brain is heavy. Like, I just can't think anymore.
Yeah.
Too much going on. For me, I noticed the, as high as the peak is, usually that low is going to be following it. So for me, it's like, how do I just maintain lower highs and lower or higher lows, so that range is not such a big whoosh. It's more kind of like for me anyway, personally, because it's
This
just
is
two
great.
bars.
I mean, so I guess I'll take the last word and then we can go around. Sorry, Andrea. So one of the things I learned I have an amazing therapist, and he did he got his master's at Johns Hopkins around substance abuse. And he describes the junkie cycle. And the junkie cycle is we go up for whatever reason, life is good, and then we up with a scarcity mindset. So when we get to the organic peak of whatever the up is, we're so terrified we're never going to have it again. We spend a ton of energy climbing as far up and staying as far up as we possibly can until our resources are expended to the degree that we must fall. We then free fall down far, far lower past our baseline than we would have if we had peaked organically. And then we have to generate just enough energy just to crawl and claw our way back to our baseline, at which point we are still completely depleted and we are left in scarcity mentality. And what's interesting is we have influence over how far up we go. We seem to have no influence over how far down we go.
Yeah.
So when treating addicts, the treatment is to get them to let go of the up organically, and then the down, they end up with energy and resources still in the down. So when they hit their baseline, they still have some left over. And so they don't have the scarcity mindset reinforced. And over time, if you continue to do that, what Tim was saying, the higher lows, your baseline raises consistently over time. So that is a whole, we should have like a text comment discussion.
It's another show.
Yeah, totally. It's a phenomenal topic. Thank you guys so much. You want to go? Does anybody want to have somebody like a pitch kind of thing they want to do? Point to anything? Drea, Des, Tim, you guys are welcome to.
If you're interested in what you've heard or what you've heard from me, you can check out my website, which is timhastings.net.
Totally. Yeah.
Yep, and you can also Facebook message and comment on the video here, and you can reach out to any of us. Absolutely.
Sweet. Drea, did you?
Yeah, reach out if you
connect.
feel inspired.
What we're doing.
We're here to transform the world.
Totally. Thank you guys so much, and I am going to take us off Facebook Live. Thank you. Goodbye, Facebook. Take care.
Thanks, Keith.
Bye. Okay, we are not live, but we are still connected.